Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Unprepared Podcast. Here with Barney Dempsey and the mighty Lainey D, who also happens to be my mother.
Hello.
And we've decided today to call this episode Witness the Fitness.
It's a good title, I feel.
Kind of in ode to
our topic of discussion today,
which is epilepsy and all that comes with it.
Yeah.
It's actually quite a long time ago now, but we randomly ended up having to deal with it.
Yeah, so nearly 6 years ago now, when you were 17.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a long time, actually.
Yeah, nearly 6 years, and that's when you had your first seizure, when you were down south with your dad, just after working at Glastonbury.
Well, what I actually thought about earlier that I realised I didn't know, or still don't know, is when and how you found out about it.
Your dad phoned. So I was up at Milnwood, up at our home, and got a phone call. I suppose I should say that Barney's dad and I were split up, and so he was down there and Barney was working with him, and phoned me at my home and just said that you had some kind of a seizure and had been to the hospital. I don't know whether he was actually I think he was at the hospital when he called, and the upshot of that was that they had said that because you'd been working in extreme heat and because you'd been to Glastonbury and hardly slept and been eating rubbish, and I think they suspected you'd possibly taken some drugs or something, considering the age you were and all that.
Quite insistent that must be the case.
So originally, until they did the test and realised that you hadn't had anything, originally they sort of thought it was a one-off, so it wasn't diagnosed as epilepsy at that point, it was just that you'd had a seizure.
Yeah, it was quite a while later.
Which is not uncommon, apparently, for people to have 1 or 2 seizures in their lifetime. That's not an epilepsy diagnosis. So that was the first time around. And then something happened right after that. Like, I think your dad was going to pap you on the train home or something. And I wasn't too chuffed about that.
Very little memory of.
And I think in the end up he got
kind of the days.
He got you up to somewhere, got you up to Carlisle or something like that. Anyway, we sorted it out, we figured it out. And then you didn't have another seizure for quite a while after that, and I was at work. And at the time you were staying out in the static caravan, and we were having work done on the house. It was work done on your bedroom. And you had got up to deal with the workmen or something like that, and anyway you were like, I woke up under the desk and you'd bashed your head, and it was odd, and you phoned me at work, and I finished work early and came home and thought it was maybe another one, and it was after that we ended up sort of going and getting the tests and getting it looked into and all that.
Yeah, the further back we go, the less kind of memories I have.
We were having a lot of activity and a lot of full tonic-clonic seizures, so I'm not surprised your memory's shot around that.
I mean, memory has, like, the effects on my memory have been sort of that seems to be a sort of generic side effect from meds, as far as I understand.
Well, I think both things, unfortunately. So I think the seizures affect your memory too. So when you're having quite a lot of seizure activity, you don't remember around about those seizures, like after or before. And then the meds definitely affect it as well. So yeah, your memory's not the best.
It depends what for.
Oh, that's true. I mean, sometimes you can remember like the detail of like the colour of socks somebody was wearing in like
In a bus
2001 when we went to the ice cream van or something like that. You remember really random little tiny details.
Generally, stuff that's pretty useless.
Yeah, sometimes.
I mean,
you also invent memories that because there's things I've told you so many times that you feel like you were there.
Yeah,
and it's like you've lived it.
I came to realise that, and I was genuinely thinking, no, that happened to me personally, and then realise after kind of needing a lot of convincing that really.
I wish I could remember what it was. You said something the other day. Or you were telling somebody something. Was it Granny? And I was thinking, you weren't there.
He wasn't there, but
he totally,
he thinks he was.
Totally thinks he was. I'm obviously repeating, but I'm like telling stories over and over again.
Maybe it's just certain things that I'm kind of like, I wish I was there.
Do you know? I don't think so, because I think the Granny's the same as we call it, the Dawn, and she tells a good story, and she's told certain stories over and over again over my lifetime, and there's quite a few that have just slipped
Changed
into my
over
memory
time,
box, and I just think, oh yeah, I remember that, and then Mark, my brother, or somebody will say to me, well, you weren't there, or you weren't even born, or
yeah,
and I'm like,
realise
oh, all right, okay,
you weren't in the world at that point.
Yeah.
So as much as my memory is affected, also I was kind of partial to sort of accidentally making stuff up anyway.
Yeah, I mean, so it wasn't like just, that. Yeah.
It's just sort of intensified the ridiculous stories on some occasions.
Yeah.
Which can be.
I mean, I think to some degree, all of us kind of embellish memories or, tailor them to suit ourselves to some extent.
Yeah.
Without even.
That can be true.
Not even deliberately, just because it makes for a better yarn, or maybe it's the way you would like to remember it and it's easier, or, there's. I think memories are really, really fascinating thing, because it's so much to do with who we are in this moment is what we remember.
Well, also, like, for memories that are very much mine, but I remember them completely differently.
Yeah.
So, like, especially, say, after a seizure or about the seizure itself, and I'll be describing it, and actually it's not. My description of it isn't particularly accurate as to what actually went down. But I think the classic case there is that the person enduring the experience, I think it's totally understandable, but generally I would say they tend to think that it lasted a lot longer than it actually did.
Yeah, I mean, how do you think it feels quicker to you than it does for whoever's observing it?
I'm not sure. I think probably more so the longer it went on, because I think most of the time I learned to assume that nothing was lasting as long as I was thinking it was lasting.
I mean, I got quite used to if you were staying with someone who wasn't used to you having seizures but knew you had them, and we would have the chat and everything about what you did and what was involved, but almost to a person they would say, oh, it was about 5 or 6 minutes long, or something like that, and I would know that it wouldn't have been, which of course it would be a call to the ambulance time kind of thing. But if they were just guessing, I remember your dad doing that quite, because your dad wasn't really around it that much, and then you stayed with him and he'd said, oh yeah, and it was like a really big long seizure. But generally most people that were with you that weren't used to being with you it would be a very long kind of time frame they would give it, and I would take it with a pinch of salt, because I knew for myself as well, like originally it felt like it would go on forever, you know, because you're just desperate for this person to come back to you, you know, so it seems like it's taken a long time.
Well, also I think that involving recovery time in that too, quite often, especially if it was up to me, quite often the recovery time would change from seizure to seizure. So sometimes I'd be quite like tired out or just kind of lie for however long.
When you first had them,
but sometimes I'd be like, right, I'm all right, and usually that would then result in potentially another seizure. Or
yeah, that took a long time. Took a long time to convince you not to just get up and get going as soon as you felt that your legs could carry your body, sort of thing, and just go. Because we'd noticed that it was a bit of a pattern of, if you did that, then you would be more likely to have a bit more seizure activity. But when you first had them, like I remember like making beds on the living room floor and stuff like that, and we would be there for 24 hours if not longer, and that was just you recovering from one or two seizures. The recovery time was really long, which like it's nothing like that now.
No, I think probably the the one seizure that has stuck in my mind the most was kind of early on, and was in the bathroom and
knocked your gnashers out.
Yeah, but just how gruesome it looked afterwards was particularly sort of upsetting, just kind of frightening a bit, I think, because as much as I'd had a decent amount of seizures by that point, that was the only one where there'd been kind of potentially serious injury. Well, not potentially, my tooth was pretty seriously chipped.
They were quite bad at the beginning. I mean, you had a seizure in the living room where you remember that wee step that you stepped up to go into the wee dining room bit, and you had a seizure on that step and fell forward, and I caught you, like I caught your head before it hit the coffee table. Oh
no,
someone's calling.
Hold on a sec. Cool. I'll sort that later.
So you know that in terms of the potential, I suppose that at those times, especially because you never got any warning or anything, then we realised that that's probably the most worrying part of like having epilepsy. It's not so much the seizure itself, which by far for most people are self-limiting and you recover from. It was more the fall, like the lack of awareness of something about to, you know, just pull the plug on you and you could fall over and damage yourself. So as much as the seizures are pretty dramatic, well, they were originally pretty dramatic and quite frightening to behold at first, they themselves are self-limiting and you rally around and you're back to yourself. So it was more like you could just fall on his head anywhere, or especially when they were quite violent in terms of the amount of motion in your body, like that one you're talking about in the bathroom where your head would whip right round and you would hit it off the wall and stuff like that. So
yeah, I seem to remember like sort of smashed tiles and blood.
Yeah.
That was that. I mean, that's obviously why it's stuck out as a sort of, I don't know, it made me picture like a kind of horror movie scene or something.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest,
it's not as gruesome as I was making it sound.
Yeah, but that's that thing about memory as well, though, because what that meant to you was quite a terrifying thing. It's quite a scary thing. So I can totally understand why your picture and memory of that is like almost like a scene out of a horror film. I mean, to me it was horrendous as well, but I know there was just a tiny wee bit of blood and there was a crack on the tile, and there was this and that, you know, and it was shocking and horrible as a mum to witness, but it wasn't like a horror movie scene particularly, really, unless
Depends
it was
on the budget.
Well, I was going to say, unless
movie.
it's like a really rubbish horror movie. I mean, I think I could do better with that than just popping down to Tam Shepherd's. I could probably.
Yeah, okay. Well, you know, I downplay it.
No, I'm not downplaying it, but you know, it's that it's kind of interesting because it's got what we were just talking about memories and
what I'm seeing
and what they mean to you, and like, you know, it's possibly the first time you've said to me about like how that being the moment where you were like, this is scary, and so it makes total sense that picture you have of that.
Well, also,
you know,
it's definitely just like the company that I'm in and the context of the scenario at the point of like a seizure taking place. Because there's definitely certain ones that are memorable for whatever reason, and I think having people around who have had previous experience or that know me particularly well is kind of obviously sort of reassuring, but certain ones that I just sort of think of as kind of, I don't know, like funny stories in a way. Mm-hmm. One being during a gig. There's a couple of those actually, but so I'm amongst people I know obviously, but it was a really random gig anyway.
Was that the Sambia Bamba?
It was with Sambia Bamba, yeah, and we were playing at this like nationwide like Scouts and Girl Scouts sort of event where they were coming to camp for the weekend at this sort of outdoor centre, and for whatever reason we'd been booked to play. There was a really annoying compere that just didn't shut up the entire time, even whilst the band was playing, which was when the seizure took place. And so I got sort of...
How did it affect your drumming?
It probably added some flair.
I mean, did you slow down or speed up? Did people go, my God, it's Buddy Rich on the drums there?
I mean, it's hard for me to know, really. I think it probably doesn't particularly add any skillful sounds, but anyway, I was sort of taken off stage, obviously, and really the only sort of indoor space nearby was basically like an old sort of airplane hangar. Not the warmest location. There is photographic evidence.
Was it winter?
It was cold.
Yeah, I have a vague memory because I drove up, didn't I?
Yeah. But there's photographic evidence of me like lying on the ground in this hangar, just almost completely concealed in everyone's jackets. Mm-hmm. So it didn't really matter how cold they were because
they were looking after you.
I was in this kind of burrito of random bits of clothing. Mm-hmm. And you can just see my face and nothing else.
I'd like to see that photo.
I thought I'd showed you it, but
I've seen it. I've seen one of you and Jack, I think, from that night.
That is the photo.
Well, so maybe I just never realised you were in the pilot coats.
Clearly,
possibly.
Thought that was the look I was working.
I don't think I knew you. I just
To me, that is just quite a sort of, not like a fond memory necessarily, but
I mean, I quite like the one
entertaining
when you were on the train after you'd come back from Germany, and you were doing a crossword.
Yeah, I was laying on the floor, kind of surrounded by Doritos that I'd been eating.
Yeah.
And of course, there was certain people that were sort of freaking out a bit who maybe hadn't witnessed one before, or were just reacting how most
Yeah,
people would,
I mean,
probably.
it's quite. It's a dramatic thing to be around when it's a full tonic
It's sort of
seizure.
explained to most people that I'm not particularly precious about like a serious attitude towards it. And one of the people who was also doing the crossword whilst I'm mid-seizure read out that the next clue we were going on to was to do with lack of balance.
Falling down or something,
I think.
wasn't it? Yeah.
Which they then told me afterwards that folk kind of pulled them up about, and I said that I'm conscious mid-seizure, and it's like it's sort of entertaining me and helping me potentially like come round quicker that someone's chatting to me and joking about it whilst it's happening.
Yeah.
It's been...
I mean, you trained me quite early on with it. I can actually hear you during this, Mother, because I remember one of the times, and this was quite early on, and it was quite a long seizure, so maybe heading for 3 minutes or something like that, over 2 minutes anyway. And when you did come round from it, you were like, I could hear you panicking there, Mum. And I was like, oh no.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And I mean, I don't think I was particularly panicky, but I think you could just hear in my voice that was going, and so that was like, you know, that stayed with me ever since, actually.
Pretty much the first thing I'll tell most people is that if you can help it, either just try and sound pretty like as chilled out as you can, or just sort of make jokes about it, or tell me things that you know I find funny, or like enjoy, or that you've heard me mention before, because it's likely to sort of shorten it.
Which is weird, isn't
it? Well, I think it's just that sort of contact thing, and because you can't shut me up whilst I might be in this sort of confused state, but I have a retort for the thing that's been... Well, exactly. So then it's making me want to reply, but obviously can't reply mid-seizure, so I need to come out of the seizure, which maybe is what speeds it up.
Maybe that's what's happening, because you want to say something smart.
Exactly. Sarcastic, usually. But yeah, often kind of mid-gig kind of seizures or absences can be quite entertaining. Like one of them that often gets a mention is
Who by?
Shelby. It was whilst I was playing with Luke and Lewis. I can't remember. I think it was in the Record Factory, which, take note, not a good venue. So we were playing and I freeze up mid-song, and again, I don't really have much memory of it, but it has been told to me many times that Lewis just kind of leaned into the mic, having stopped playing mid-song, and I can't remember the exact quote, but it was like bear with us, he's having an aura, or something like that. And I'm like...
That's genius.
I'm like mid-freeze, kind of going, Lewis, very few people are going to know what that means, and it then really isn't a good excuse.
They might have a new age kind of vibe to that.
Yeah, it doesn't really come across as like...
The drummer's aura is causing him a few problems, yeah.
Like, it's okay for us to stop because of that. It just sounds really random.
That's quite cool.
So, I mean, yeah, it was dead nice that he kind of brought it to...
Bear with us, he's having an aura.
Yeah, well, I just liked how sort of chilled the response it was, and they both knew that it wasn't a particularly big deal most of the time.
Yeah.
And actually, for, I would say, about half of the absence, I kept playing anyway.
In time?
Probably not so much. It was the right beat, but as is often the way we've discovered since then, I'll quite often just continue whatever is happening.
Yeah.
If it's that type of absence.
Yeah. Like keep walking, or keep doing the dishes, or keep brushing your teeth. Or...
Well, yeah, that was potentially the most frustrating and hilarious one recently.
I found that amusing, I'm not going to lie. But I had to go
like,
into my room to be amused by it initially.
I was like, just kind of one side of my teeth are going to be like minty fresh, and the other side are going to be unbrushed.
Yeah.
But
we should mention here that Barney had an absence seizure while he was brushing his teeth, and could not stop brushing his teeth for quite some time, but only on one side of his mouth.
Yeah, I've got no control over it, so wherever I am is that just stays.
So half his mouth was sparkling ashers,
and
the other half
yet to be brushed at all. And I'm having these thought processes as the absence is going on. So I was stood, like, watching myself in the mirror, brushing my teeth, going, I can't stop brushing my teeth.
Well, I mean, I have actually seen you giggle mid-seizure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, more than once for sure. Definitely when I actually stood on the button that turned the desk lamp on, that lit your face up mid-seizure, when what I was trying to do was turn the lights off.
Yeah.
And I think I did one of my...
desperate attempt to kind of...
one of my compound swearing...
change...
extravaganzas
just
around
sort
that.
of what's going on, to see if a change in light or
I mean,
change in sound.
But for you that's worked a lot. I mean, I know it doesn't work for... because I work at epilepsy hospital in Govan, so I'm around people that have seizures a lot, and you know, everyone's are different, every person's is different, but there are a few things in common here and there, but yours really are quite unusual. And there has been times where I've just like flicked a lamp off that's just to the side of you, and your seizure just stops, like I've switched the seizure off.
Yeah.
Which is kind of quite a weird one. There's also been times of just turning the sound off of something. Remember the time we were up the West End and you had the gig, and you were having repeated little partial seizures where you were in and out of consciousness, and we were thinking, how's he going to do this gig, because you hadn't got on this.
I believe that's the same one.
That's the same one that you said, oh, we're having, right, okay. So do you remember we went out into the street? Firstly we sat out the back,
and eventually,
and they kept going, and then we sat out, we went out in the street, and eventually you had to just sit down on the street with your back against the wall.
Either you or someone else went.
Me and Shelby were with you.
Try putting your earplugs in.
And I said, put your earplugs in, and you were like, and then I kind of got them out and then you put them in, and it was one of those ones where you couldn't string a sentence together, so you couldn't get your words out properly.
Which for me is a nightmare.
Well, indeed, though a bit of a relief for us.
Yeah.
But then you stuck your earplugs in, and immediately that was you. You were like, oh no, that's fine now, yeah, and so it's some sort of sensory thing happening.
It doesn't always work, which is
and neither does the light thing, and
even more frustrating is that things like that, you can kind of rely on them to an extent, but they won't always have an effect. I
mean, as you know, I always think there's some sort of level of reduce the amount of sensory input, and it might bring it to an end sooner. So quite often I like run around the room like a demon, like turning off lights and turning off projectors and sounds and all that kind of thing.
Potentially it's actually just the sight of you running around the room that actually has the most effect.
Yes.
Rather than...
I can appreciate that.
The actual thought behind it.
But yeah, I mean, I was chatted about this for half an hour now, and I feel like, you know,
we've
just touched the tip of the iceberg there.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be interesting at some point, maybe a few podcasts down the line or something like that, but, you know, just to talk about, as a young guy, the impact that it's had on you and how you live with those kind of things, and maybe from my side of things, like, you know, try to figure out being a mum round about that, and that side of things as well. If you'll have me back.
I think it could definitely be a Witness the Fitness part 2 or beyond.
Yeah.
Because as I've told people for a long time, I'm totally fine talking about it, and kind of would rather that people sort of joke about it with me rather than sort of try and tread carefully, because I like to think reasonably quickly, but maybe not. Again, that's potentially just the way I'm remembering it, but I like to think that I pretty quickly got to the stage where actually I felt like not taking it too seriously was beneficial in this area.
Yeah, I can't remember how long that took you, to be honest. It certainly did take a while. It was a huge period of adjustment for sure for you.
For a lot of people.
Yeah, for me, whatever. But I do think you've always been fairly open about it. It took you a long time to be interested in finding out about it or talking to other people that had epilepsy and that kind of thing. You definitely had a bit of a curtain up there that you didn't want any information about it, or
it felt like when I kind of went down that route of thinking or concentration on it, that it increased activity, or it didn't feel healthy to always have it on my mind. But I think that's kind of altered the further down the line we've got.
Yeah, no, I think it has to, and I think for anybody you've got to come to these places yourself, because it's an awful lot to, especially for a 17-year-old young guy, to like take on and figure out and then go on with life, which I think you've been brilliant at doing. I think that's probably a good place to stop.
Yeah,
and,
have a break before the next one.
Well, yeah. No, you have been. So, you can maybe talk about that a bit the next time around.
Nice to hear. Cool. Well, that's Witness the Fitness Unprepared Podcast episode 2. Over and out.